Being open-minded is a key trait of exceptional leaders, the people that others follow, the people who have a reputation for being able to get things done that others can't. In today's video, I'm going to share some different tips and tricks for how we can be open-minded at work as, say, project managers or team managers, and then in our own lives too, where we're growing our influence across social media. I'm going to start with some different concepts that make up open-mindedness. So, for example, the difference between being pragmatic versus dogmatic, or flexible versus being aimless. I'm Paul Fleming McCullough. This is the Be Helpful experiment. So let's start with the why question. Why should I be open-minded? What's in it for me? Well, there's two things. Right, so the first one is we're open to learning new things, right? We have that growth mindset because we're looking at all sorts of different perspectives and different concepts. We have a head full of new ideas that we can then put into practice. So when somebody comes and says, hey, Paul, can you help me provide a solution to the problem that I have? Because I've got all of this knowledge, I can now put that into practice and solve their problem for them. And because I've listened to them and to other people, I've got a really good perspective, right? That bigger picture as to what their problem is and how I can provide the right solution. And then actually execute on that and then deliver on that right solution. And because we're doing all of those things, right? Because we're open to new ideas and concepts, and because we're able to then deliver and execute on those, that gives us the reputation for being somebody who can work with anybody and everybody, but also deliver the projects and the solutions that other people can't. And when we're thinking about being open-minded, it pays to be thoughtful, because we don't want to be so open-minded that we're just like an open bucket that's just water sloshing everywhere. Ideas come in and ideas just go straight out again. So there's a finite amount of space up here. And so as ideas come in, then something's going to come out. And so if we're headed down a direction and we're, say, solving the problem a particular way, and we get a new idea that comes in, well, we want to be thoughtful about it. We want to think through it and see what the impacts are. But if we take that idea and we run with it, well, now we're going to go off in the right direction. Now, if we are going to go off in the right direction and we're going to be more efficient and more proficient with what we're doing, then that's an idea that we want to accept. And so then our old way of doing things, that's going to come out. But if our new idea, after we've reviewed it, and we decide, you know what, it's probably not going to take us in the right direction, then that new idea, that's not going to go in. And we're going to keep going down our path. Sweet as, still. So everything's all good. The difference between being dogmatic and pragmatic, where even though we might be open-minded, when we're dogmatic, we're still only just focused within our particular bias. We're not open to other things. And when we do that, right, that's going to stunt our career and kill our reputation. But when we're pragmatic, when we're open to all sorts of ideas, even ones that perhaps at first view we weren't keen on, that's actually going to help us grow, right, and have the reputation for being somebody who can get the things done that others can't. In my younger years, I used to drive a Triumph Spitfire, British sports car, soft top. Oh, it's fantastic. I love that car. And there was a rivalry between Triumph drivers and MG drivers. And it, sort of all goes back to the road racing days of the 50s and the 60s with Le Mans. And those types of races, and it's probably similar to, right, that kind of Ford versus Chevy rivalry that there exists in the United States as well. And so the thing is, you'd be driving down the road, and if you saw a fellow Triumph Spitfire coming the other direction, or maybe it's a Herald or a Vitesse, you'd flash the lights and you give a big hearty wave. But then if it was an MG driver, you kind of have a bit of a scowl. But the point is it was a friendly rivalry, because at the end of the day, right, we all had this appreciation for sports cars. And if it was a nice sports car, it didn't matter the badge on the front. But there's another side now to that sort of rivalry, where it isn't friendly, where it becomes quite toxic. And so, for example, in the early days of mobile, there was a huge rivalry between if you were on the Apple platform or the Android platform. I was working with a number of people who were very, very set in their ways. I mean, almost to the point where you couldn't be friends. If you were on an Apple device, You couldn't be friends with someone who had an Android device. There was that much kind of antagonism between them. Now let's talk about the good things that happen when we're pragmatic. One of the best compliments I've received was from my former boss and mentor, who said that I was very pragmatic. Now, I read a lot, but the thing is, when I read, if it holds my attention, I'll stay with something. If it doesn't, I'll ditch it and move on. I'm not particularly sentimental from that perspective. And so what that means is that I pick up lots of little bits of things from all sorts of places, right? That golden nugget idea, it's something that you will have heard me talk about in the last episode, when we're talking about balance and when you're listening to different people and different perspectives. It's that idea that we go, I like that. I really like that. I can run with that. I know what I can do with that. Over the years, I've developed this particular approach to managing projects and teams. It's all based on a real melting pot of ideas from all sorts of different places. Charles Duhigg's book on habits, why we do what we do, right? That gave me the inspiration for the keystone habits. What was my keystone habit that has a major impact on everything else that I do? Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's an excellent book. But what I love about it the most is the title. I mean, that really tells you all you need to know. Now, there's one book that a lot of people rave about, and that's Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People. But for me, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't even make it a quarter of the way through before I ditched it, and I just kind of put it off to one side. Actually, I got it out of the library. I'm really glad I didn't spend money on it. And I couldn't get into it. But one of the things that I did get out of it and that I did appreciate, and this was in conversations with other people, is his idea of, when it comes to scheduling, that you put the big rocks on the calendar first, and then you schedule the small stuff around it. So for me, that's a really good idea of being pragmatic, which is that although I didn't get on with the book, I didn't shut my mind off to Covey's ideas. I actually found one that I liked, and I use it. Now let's look at the difference between being flexible versus being just aimless and going in any direction. So let's say we want to fly or we want to travel from LA on the west coast of the United States, and we want to go into Europe and want to go to Paris, France, right? Eiffel Tower, River Seine, the Louvre, all that good stuff. So after review, we've come up with a couple of different options. Now let's just assume here, that this is a time without coronavirus when all travel options are open and we're good to go. Okay, so option number 1, we could fly direct from LA straight into Paris. Done, right? Maybe our other option, because we have 5 days in which to do this, is let's say, we're going to fly from LA to London in the UK, and we're going to stay over for a couple of days, maybe catch a show at the West End, right? Take a look at Trafalgar Square, Buckingham Palace, that kind of stuff. And then we're going to take the train from London into Paris, and we'll go through the Channel Tunnel and see the beautiful countryside along the way. Now let's take a different approach, where we have no plan. We're just going to turn up at the airport and see where we end up, right? So it's that Brownian motion approach is that we're going to take, right? We just turn up and see where we go, and then see where we end up next time. That kind of just random bounce to bounce. How many hops, how many skips is it going to take us to get from our starting point to our destination? Are we going to fly? Are we going to drive? We're going to take the train. Maybe we could swim across the English Channel. Certainly not going to swim across the Atlantic, right? We'll take a boat. And so, it's going to take us forever to get there. And now all of a sudden we're going to be thinking, are we there yet? So if we are, if money and time are no object, that's going to be a really interesting way to see the world, isn't it? Just turn up and go wherever we feel like going. But if money and time are a big deal for us in that idea of time, budget, and scope from that project management triangle, then turning up and not having a plan for where we want to go is a terrible approach, a terrible way of doing things. But if we have our starting point and our end point, and we have a plan with a couple of different options in between, we find that we've actually got a lot more flexibility, a lot more freedom. We're going to have a lot more success within that defined project than we are by not having any plan at all and just taking and just seeing what comes up and where we end, and where do we want to go? What do we want to do? A plan gives us that freedom. It gives us our guardrails and a safety net within which we can be flexible and adaptive and successful. Now that we've covered some of the theory behind being open-minded and the differences between being pragmatic versus dogmatic, flexible versus being aimless, now let's look at some practical examples as to how we can put that information into practice, right? In this example, it's about looking at different industries and different areas and seeing the way that they work, the processes that they use, the approach that they use, and seeing the patterns within there that you can then take and transpose across to your own industries, to your own projects. So a few years ago, I had to take somebody to the ER, right, to the hospital emergency room. It was quite a scary situation. And so to help kind of reduce my stress and freak out levels, I actually spent a lot of time watching very closely what was going on. So you'd be watching the nurses, and you're watching the senior nurse, and you're watching the doctor to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. Sitting in that emergency room, it became very clear very quickly that there was a structure, that there was an organization to what was going on. So the nurses all knew what they needed to do. The senior nurse knew what he needed to do. And the doctor knew what he needed to do, and everybody else knew what the others were doing. And then there was a whiteboard on one of the walls, tracked who the people were, but obviously very importantly, who the patient was and what their problem was, what the fix was to get them healthy again, and what the steps needed to happen in between. And so it was very simple to see who needed to do what and when. There were three things that I took from this, that I took back to my own projects. So the first one being this idea of simplified processes. So to be very clear, right, as to exactly who needed to do what and what those steps were. Which then leads me into the second thing, which is making sure that everybody understood what they needed to do. So again, if you're starting with those simple processes and simple steps, it makes it a lot easier for people to understand what they need to do. And then the third thing that I took from it was training. And again, because everybody knew what they needed to do, they knew how to do it. So if you've got all of those things, if you've got those simple steps, everybody knows what they need to do, and everybody understands how to do it, you've immediately set yourself up for success. And so now, being able to take that idea from the hospital approach and transpose it across to custom software, it made a huge difference to how I managed my projects and my teams, and also increased the amount of success that I had in delivering projects on time and on scope and on budget. This example is about being open-minded to receiving different feedback on the ideas that we present. One of the things that my former boss was very good at was encouraging people to ask questions on his ideas. So when he would cast the ideas out to the leadership team, the intention always was to get that feedback, was to improve that idea, to work on it. It wasn't just that it's a once and done, hey, here's my idea, we're moving forward with it no matter what. He always encouraged people to question. It was because he saw a lot of value in that. Because then we could find the things that maybe he thought he'd missed, right? Or the things that he could improve on to make his idea work the best it could for as broad a group of people as it could. My final example shows the difference between being pragmatic versus dogmatic when it comes to social media, and in particular, obviously, right, my own approach to growing my network, to growing the number of followers that I have. So as we all know, there's 1,000,001 influencers out there, and each one tells us something different, right? This is how to gain followers, this is how to get your first 1,000 subs on YouTube, this is what to do on LinkedIn, right? All that kind of stuff. And if we kind of listened to each and every single one of them and acted on what they were telling us, we'd just be bouncing around kind of right from one idea to another. We'd never settle on a strategy to see if it would work. So this is why we need to be pragmatic with our approach here. And this is definitely the approach that I'm taking, because I know where I want to go. I know why I want to get there, why I want to increase my following across YouTube and LinkedIn. I also know I'm comfortable with my style and with the voice that I have, right? Whether it's in the written word or whether I'm presenting on video. So I have my defined goals that I want to achieve. But I'm open to learning new ways of improving how I come across on the camera, how I do my video editing, how I'm writing with my grammar, right? Keeping things kind of punchy so that people want to read it and keep going. when you look at thumbnails on YouTube, you'll see a lot of people where they're pulling, right, there's that funny expression, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'll be honest, that's not me. No, that's not my approach. But I do like the idea of having kind of like, right, that face on there so that you've got that visual recognition. But more than anything, you're looking at a fellow person, right? You're looking at a human being. So you have that eye-to-eye connection. And my intention with my videos, and obviously too with my posts in general, is to improve as each one goes along. So the video that you're watching now is going to be a big improvement, hopefully, on ones that I've done previously. And ones that I'll do in the future, again, should be a big improvement on what I'm doing today. And so I'm doing that by watching all sorts of different people, reading all sorts of different articles too. And I'm picking and choosing, like I said, I'm picking and choosing the things that I like and the things that make sense to me about it. But I'm not so dogmatic in my view that this is the only way that I'm going to do it, and my ideas are within that bias. I'm open to all sorts of different things. In conclusion then, being open-minded allows us to have a growth mindset so that we can learn new things, so that we can see the whole picture of what's going on, which allows us then to create the right solution to people's problems, which means that we're an effective problem solver. And because we're open to everybody's opinions, we work well with everybody and anybody, which makes us somebody that people want to work with, which in short makes us that exceptional leader, that person that others follow, that can get things done that others can't. I'm Paul Fleming McCullough. Be helpful. So if you're looking to grow your career or learn something new, but in short, be able to deliver the projects that other people can't and have a reputation as being the go-to person, then this is the channel for you. Hit the old subscribe button, and then also while you're here, catch up on some of my previous episodes from the Be Helpful experiment. Cheers, peeps. Be helpful.